Here is where this gets hard. 10K Dexter would be pretty tough. They're pretty heavy. A lot of times the seal is stuck on the spindle. 8K is a little easier, but sometimes they're stuck on there as well. That way, when you're pulling on it to relieve the seal off the spindle, it just don't fall off in your lap. You've got to catch here. So let's see if we can wiggle this loose. I'm gonna say it's a no. It ain't gonna go. We had a viewer leave us a comment asking if we could do a video on changing an oil seal. Now, before we get into that, is it oil or oil? What part of the country are you from? Where I'm from, it's oil, bowl, full, coal. It's all the same. It just is. It's the way it's always been. It's the way it always will be. So leave a comment below if it's oil or oil. Or is there 3 syllables in oil, possibly? I don't know. I'm going to stick with oil. So today, we're going to work on this 12K Dexter axle. We're going to change the oil seal in it, or the oil seal in it. I do have this mocked up. I have the brake assembly taken off just so we can get some better shots on that. The nuts and everything have been pre-loosened, so if it's easier to take apart than yours, that's why, just to save a little bit of time. So let's just jump right into this video. The first thing we're gonna do is remove the oil cap. I have already drained all the oil out of this, so if this is still on your trailer, obviously you're gonna need a drain pan to catch all of the oil. There's a couple ways to take the jam nut and the inner nut off. You can use a pair of channel locks. It's the old method. You can use a chisel. What I prefer is an axle nut. You can pick these up these days, pretty reasonable. This actually comes in a set, so we'll leave that in a link below. So if you do this on a regular basis, these are not bad for what they cost. So the first thing we gotta do, if you see real closely right here, there's a washer that's got some tabs around it. So we're gonna bend those tabs up so that we can remove this nut. Usually there's a couple. I've seen 3. I've seen them all knocked down. Somebody that's really fired up. Now sometimes when you get the axle nuts, they're gonna come 3/4. I specifically order these for a 1/2 inch. So I can just use my breaker bar on it to make it simple. So normally this outer nut is gonna be pretty tight. Then you're gonna remove this washer. You can take a look at that. What we do here, you can reuse your washer. No more than these things cost. Our procedure here in the shop is we replace them every time. If the nut's in good condition, we'll clean that up and wash the nut. They're a little bit more expensive, and they've gotten really expensive in the last year. Sometimes you'll need to use a socket to relieve the pressure on the inner nut that's holding pressure on the bearing. A lot of times, if it's got any miles on it, it's gonna be finger tight. So don't freak out if you say, man, that thing was finger tight. It's okay, she'll take it off. Then you have the inner washer. Then after that is the bearing. Here is where this gets hard. This is a 15K Dexter. A 10K Dexter would be pretty tough. They do make some old Alco 16Ks you're gonna see around. They're pretty heavy. A lot of times the seal is stuck on the spindle, so it's hard to get off. I'm gonna show you a couple different methods. 8K is a little easier, but sometimes they're stuck on there as well. If you're doing anything really bigger than an 8K, you probably need some help doing it unless you have a wheel dolly or something like that, which we have one, but those are pretty pricey. Most people's not gonna have that. You may just grab an extra set of hands, but it's gonna take some pressure to get this off. So what I like to do is I like to put the nut back on it, just run it down to about the first set of threads. That way when you're pulling on it to relieve the seal off the spindle, it just don't fall off in your lap. You've got to catch here. So let's see if we can wiggle this loose by hand. I don't know that we can. This is a new axle. It's gonna be pretty tight. We'll try it, and if not, I'll show you a couple other methods. So. I'm gonna say it's a no. It ain't gonna go. So we're gonna show you a method we use. I'm gonna show you an old school method, some stuff you'd probably have laying around. So let me go grab some tools. This is an old school method. This is something I learned as a child for pulling out axle shafts, drums. This is something we would not use normally in the shop. But you take your piece of chain, and you don't have to have S-hooks on it. If you have a piece of chain that's big enough that's got a link that will slip over the stud, that's fine too. Then you're gonna take your loop. Then I would not recommend using your favorite sledgehammer. I would recommend using a good one though. If you have one that the head's a little loose on, it will pull the head off of the handle. So you're gonna take this and you're not trying to hit a home run, you're just trying to give it some force. Just popping it loose. Making sure we're not gonna fall off the jack stand. So that's one method. The other method we would use here in the shop, this fancy dancy apparatus we built about 10 years ago. It basically goes on the nuts. You tighten that down, and it's basically a homemade puller. Once you have these shafts tightened down on the nuts, you would tighten that, and it's going to pull the shaft off. That's how we're going to get that one off. But this will work, especially with it being on the trailer where it's holding the axle. You can get some pressure, and like I said, don't try to get off on the first swing. You're just using force just over and over. So there it comes. That didn't take much. If I would have kept on pulling with the hammer, it probably would have popped off. I just didn't want to knock this off of the jack stand since I don't have a drum on the other side. So don't be afraid of the sledgehammer method. You just got to take your time and be careful. This old puller here has pulled a lot of hubs. Now we're going to take our nut back off, and this drum is ready to come off. The next hardest thing to do after you've unloaded this heavy hub and drum and put it in the floor is getting the seal out. Sometimes the seal will actually stick on the spindle. As you can see, this one here is probably stuck in the hub itself. So we're going to show a couple different methods to pull this bad boy out and see if I can do some more heavy breathing. So I have a big adjustable heel bar here. We're going to try to pry this bad boy out. I have the heel bar in between the bearing and the back side of the seal. So let's give it a little bump. And you can work your way around it. If you have somebody help stand on it, that's helpful too. This one is stuck, so I'm gonna show you a different method to pull that out. So what we're gonna do, we have the drum face side up. You can see the bearing in there. We're gonna take a hammer. This is a fiberglass shaft, rubber handle. You can use a good hickory or any type of hardwood hammer. You're gonna hit against the bearing, but you're not gonna try to drive this out with one hit. You're gonna work your way around the bearing just so as hopefully we don't damage the bearing. And out she comes. So that is your seal. And that is your inner bearing. This would be a good time to inspect your bearings. So several questions that I get on a regular basis. Why are my seals leaking? Why do I need to change my seals? And how often do I need to change my seals? I will tell you, in my opinion, and this is just an opinion, just from what I see on a daily basis, been doing this for years, the common cause for the seal failure on an oil bath seal is overbraking. Excessive heat, it will melt the gasket material, the rubber material out of the seal, and then you will lose oil. Sometimes people do over lube the hub. They put too much oil in it. It can blow out. Usually it blows out the front end though. So I'm gonna say 9 out of 10 times it is either a cheap seal, which we're fixing to cover, or it's just from over braking, and or both. If I'm pulling every day, if I'm a professional pulling 5-6 days a week, put a ton of miles on, I'm gonna tear this down one time a year, go ahead and change my seals. It's gonna take you one day to do that if you can do it yourself, or maybe if you can schedule that with somebody. It may seem like you don't have the time, but I guarantee if you broke down the side of the road and you come into a shop, like if you were to come in here today and you need a repair on this, I'm about 10 days out. So if you're over the road making a living with your rig, that's gonna be tough to set out for 10 days. So just take you a weekend, check your seals, do some maintenance, save you some time and trouble down the road, because you may be out in the middle of nowhere and you can't get a seal. So there's several different types of seals. The old factory seal looks like this dude right here. The name on it, I can't even pronounce. If you can see that, don't know if you can or not. But if you have this seal in there, throw that sucker in the trash. If you're watching and you make this seal, I'm sorry, but this seal sucks. It's probably the worst that I've ever seen. Most factory axles do not use this anymore. Most are using the seal we took out. This says Dexter on it. Used to, if you open a Dexter, it would have that old junker in there. So take a look at this oily thing, and I'm going to show you what we put back. Ours does not say Dexter in it. Ours is from a company that's been around a minute. Oh, upside down. They've been around, National Oil Seals. This is all we put. If it's an oil bath, all we're going to put is a National Oil Seal in there. Sometimes we will buy Timken, because many times for this seal setup, as well as the 10K, they're reboxing a National, so we'll use the National seal in those. So if you see, it looks very similar to the Dexter we pulled out. They are both made in Mexico. I think there's a good chance they're both coming from the same source. So we see very little seal failure on new axles today. 7, 8, 9 years ago, we seen new axle failure all the time, regular basis. We've seen axles that would come from the plant to us and they would already be leaking. And it had one of these guys in there. So remember, if you're watching me make this seal, you need to get it together. This is awful. So if you go into a parts store, if this is all they have and you're in a bind, I guess put it in. But man, I'm gonna tell you, as soon as you can get a National seal or at least a Dexter seal that looks like the National, I'm gonna tell you, swap that dude out. So remember, over braking, you've seen your drums, you smelled your brakes, you're running that thing on 10 because you want to save the brakes on your truck, right? Now you got to pay attention to your brakes. You got to make sure your brakes are adjusted. We have some great videos on brake adjustment, how to run your brake controller, so check those out. We'll leave some links below on that. At this time, it's going to be good to inspect your spindle to make sure you don't have any rust or corrosion. If you do have some rust, or if it's just a little bit nasty, it's discolored, it's been a long time since you've changed the oil in it, take you some fine emery cloth, polish this thing up, clean it off. Make sure your threads are clean. You can take a wire brush and clean all these out if there's any gunk in there. Same thing on the front side of the drum, the thread where the threads go in for the cap, make sure that's clean too. Make it a little easier to get your cap on. We are not going to clean this drum today for time's sake. As you can see, look at all this rust in there. And sometimes we'll get them like this that are brand new. This is just superficial rust because it's been sitting in a yard somewhere. This will burn off. If you've already got it off though, just take some sandpaper, clean that dude up. Wash the insides out, wash your bearings. If you had to drive the bearing out like we just did a second ago because the thing was in there so tight, make sure to look at it, make sure you didn't dent it anywhere. Just check it out. This one is great. There's nothing wrong with it. I am going to put this back in dirty because this is going to get torn down again for something else. Like I said, this is just a mock-up for training purposes. We're using this for some training purposes for our guys as well here in the shop and for y'all out there. So let's put the bearing in it, then I'm going to show you how we install the seal. The other thing to look at, I don't know if was that zoom in, can you see where it says oil side? So you have an oil side, the other side says nothing, that's the air side. So that's just what it says. This is air, this goes out, oil goes in to where the oil is going to go. So drop our bearing down, we'll double check, put the oil side in. Now the hard part. You can use a large punch. There's nothing wrong with that, but you got to take your time. You're not gonna hit a home run again. You're just gonna tap it as you go. Once you get it started, it'll take you a little bit. You just got to be patient. You can tap it like that. I mean, I'm barely hitting it. I'm just basically making a consistent vibration that's just walking it in there. So that's one way to do it. You just don't want to hit it hard because you can dent the housing on that, which will in turn mess up the rubber that's in there. They do make a seal install kit. If you buy a National seal, it will usually give you instructions in here how to install it. You can order the seal installer. We don't use that. We made our own. We were fortunate enough to find a piece of pipe that's the exact OD for a 12K and a 10K. As you can tell, that sucker has put some seals in. So we put this in. The next question I get is, how far do you know to drive it? The back side of the seal receiver on this hub is machined with a stop in it, so it's going to bottom out before it hits the bearing. So we're going to hit this in. And again, I'm not hitting hard. Show you another way. It's almost there. You can also use a block of wood. This is not a great block. I'm not going to use this block, but just to show you a representation, you want one a little bit bigger for this style. This would be good for like a 8K or a 10K. You're going to do the same thing. You're just going to walk that around. But I'll tell you what, we'll go ahead and finish it off with our punch just so you can see it go down. I don't know if you can hear that. It changed sounds. It's bottomed out. So you can see it's a little bit recessed there. And you can also pay attention when you pull your old seal out to make sure you get it back about the same. You're not going to overdrive it. You can crush the seal, but you don't want to underdrive it because your drum is not going to go back on all the way. So once you've done this, make sure you have no debris. Make sure all this is clean. Make sure your spindle's clean. And we're going to lift this big heavy sucker back up here and see if we can get it installed. Okay, now we have a good clean spindle. We're going to put some oil on here, and this is oil we would use to fill it. It's Mystic 8090. This new seal is going to be very tight, so make sure this is where the seal sets here. This is your inner bearing, your outer bearing. Nothing sets here, so outer, nothing, inner, and then the seal surface right here. If you're tearing down your old axle, you want to make sure this area here, this is always going to be nasty. It's going to break dust and all kinds of crap all over it. Clean that out really good, because if you get that new seal up there, that stuff comes in, you can just imagine it's just going to wear it down. So make sure it's all good and clean. And as we said earlier in the video, we do have the brake assembly off of this, just so we can get a little bit better view of the install, hopefully. And so always wipe a little inside the seal as well, and on the bearing. It will be easier with this on your trailer. You'll be a little lower. You can push it on. You can even use your feet. You hold on the side of the trailer and use both feet to push it in. You can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Just try to keep it straight as you're going in so the seal is not at an angle. Once that bearing gets to right here, the seal is going to go on straight. It's going to keep it in line. That bearing is going to push it back. Then as soon as you can, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, put your outer bearing, and then even as you're tightening it up, you can use that to press it the rest of the way on. I hope you've ate your Wheaties. I don't know that I have. So now that we got the seal started on the spindle, we're going to go ahead and put our outer bearing in. That will keep everything lined up. We'll put our washer, and we'll put the inner nut, and then we're going to tighten this all the way down. So that's going to seat the seal all the way to bottom. Sorry about that, that was loud. With your brakes on here, you're going to want to be turning this counterclockwise while you're tightening clockwise. This will set the thrust on the bearing. You're going to bottom it out. Then you're going to back it a full turn off. And then you're going to bottom it out again. And try not to turn the hub the next time. Now you're going to set it. So imagine this is 12 o'clock. You're going to back it off about a quarter turn. And that will set your bearing thrust. You'll put your tang washer on. You put a new one on, but for this, I'm going to put that on. It already has the tabs bent down. If it were a new washer, you would need to put that on. And we have a video going in depth about that we'll leave a link to as well. Put the tabs down there. Once those tabs are down, this washer here, you just get that dude tight, all the way tight. And then you would take your chisel and you would bend these tabs down, just bend a couple of them to lock that nut in place. Then you're ready to put the cap on, you're ready to put the oil back in it, and then you're ready to adjust your brakes. So check those videos out. We have a video that tells you how to check, properly fill your fluid level, how to maintain, how to check and adjust your brakes, whether that's a 3,500 pound axle all the way up to these big bad boys. If it's a drum brake, pretty much still the same concept, just a few little tweaks here and there. So now you just need to put your cap back on. So you have a choice. You can put the old cap like this, and there's nothing wrong with that if you keep a good close eye on these. Just make sure you keep them clean so you can see your fluid levels in there. I do recommend the Balcrum cap. A lot of the manufacturers are going to this. If you buy a new axle or new trailer, they're going to start putting this on from the factory. There's going to look a little different, still made by the same guys. It's got a good plug in it, good sight glass, and it's made out of aluminum. It's just going to last a little longer. It's not going to crack out as easy. It goes on the same way. You just tighten that down, then you'll feel your fluid level. So remember to check out our other videos that we're going to leave in the link. Hope you've enjoyed the videos we've done so far. And just like this, if you have a good idea for a video, leave that in the comments below. We like to do what y'all are dealing with out there, because sometimes what's going on in our world may not be going on in your world. So check out our other videos. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you soon.